a modern topic, the topic of cosmetic surgery. That is to say, elective surgery that doesn't. I'm not doing it for any medical purposes. I'm a fully healthy individual, but for whatever reason, I want to change the way I look. Now we're going to talk about two things. First of all, we're going to talk about cosmetic surgery, which is a machloket that we will look at. And then after that, perhaps could be more relevant for a larger number of people, is to talk about piercings. Because the truth is that there's a difference in magnitude, doing a cosmetic surgery, but if it's a safe surgery, in both situations I'm drawing blood, and therefore things that I could be concerned to do to have a medical procedure, it's not a million miles away to talk about piercings as well in the same context. So we're going to see how the two may or may not be related. Yes?
Would this include hair plugs? People get surgery to get
I don't know what that means.
No, I mean for their hairline they get
Oh, I heard about that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Does this include that?
I
imagine that's also cosmetic.
Yes, yeah.
You're just plugging as opposed to cutting. I have no idea.
No, it's just called hair plugs, but it's hair transplant, same thing.
But are you taking something out or just putting something in?
No. I mean, I don't know how this works. I think they just put hair follicles.
They take hair from the other parts of your body and put it on your head.
There you are. Excellent. Yes, I think it might be slightly different.
But there is
because you're not. Are you drawing blood? You're not drawing blood.
I think there is. It has to be some because they're poking holes in your head.
Stitching you in.
Oh my gosh! I feel it's really not my cup of tea at all.
If you go to Turkey, there are people who do that.
Yeah, we'll say about that. What a random thing to know. Okay, people. So we're gonna start with the Mishnah and the Rambam. We're going to do the Mishnah and then the Rambam, and then really the applications of that. So the Mishnah, Mishnah in Bava Kama, is part of a wider discussion, but as part of that wider discussion, the Mishnah, talks about somebody who wounds themselves. The Mishnah says like this: Hachovel ba'atzma. If somebody wounds themselves, now wounding normally means to draw blood. If I wound myself, afal pisha ino rashai, even though you're not allowed to do it, patur, meaning there's no punishment. Achirim shachavlu bo chayvim, but somebody else, draws blood, then they are liable. Now, patur does not mean that it's okay. If something is permitted in halacha, we say that it is mutar. Patur just means what you did is wrong, but there's no punishment for it. So we see from the Mishnah that somebody who draws blood did something wrong. There's no punishment for it. Eino rashai means you're not allowed to do it, but you're not punished for doing it. Part of it could be, I'm just wondering, maybe because when I wound somebody, part of what I have to pay for is compensation. And since I couldn't pay compensation to myself, when I wound somebody, you have to pay for the medical bills. But you're going to be paying for the medical bills anyway. You have to pay for the embarrassment you cause them. But if I cause myself the embarrassment, it's hard to figure out how I would pay myself. You follow? Mm-hmm. So it could just be, I'm just wondering, it could be that for technical reasons, there's no way that I can, be fined, but it's not okay. Eino rashai, but there's no punishment. That is the Mishnah.
What is we're saying a wound? I don't know if the Rabbi knows offhand, but what is the terminology used in the Chumash when we say not to make a scar or a wound or a cut? Lamashal for mourning. For mourning, it says we can't make a cut.
Yeah, the seret lenefesh, seret like a cut. Yeah.
That's obviously different because a cut is self-inflicted, not for the sake of. So there's nobody. The person would, of course, be culpable. Right. Culpable. It's obviously consent, so on and so forth. So would this be more in that line than a wound? Or I guess we'll get there.
I don't know. We also have That's Serel nefesh lo titnu b'vsarchem. Like you shouldn't cut yourself. Ktovet ka'aka. That's a tattoo. That's also not allowed. There is, I think it's in Parashat. That was in Parashat Kedoshim. But in Parashat Mishpatim, when we're told about, like people fighting each other. So the Torah uses the word makeh aviv v'imo, and then you have mekalel aviv v'imo. Makeh aviv v'imo, somebody who beats them. But normally, we understand that makeh aviv v'imo means you hit them and draw blood.
Right.
So the words of the Mishnah is not the word. It doesn't say makeh b'chavero. It doesn't say soret b'chavero, like scratching them. It says chovel b'chavero or ba'atzmo. Okay, those are the words of the Mishnah. And I'll tell you what's very, very interesting. Do you notice over here that the book of Halacha, but was based on the page of the Gemara. So therefore, I need to know the Gemara in order to know where to find the Halacha. What the Rambam was trying to do was to try to create that, also to create this book of Halacha, but make it much more accessible. Here, in this topic of wounding, Rambam adds something that didn't appear in the Mishnah or the Gemara. Sounds interesting because it's rare that the Rambam adds. Normally he's cutting down and he's trying to clarify. But look what the Rambam says over here. The Rambam says, Asur la'adam lachpol, you're not allowed to cause a wound, bein ba'atzmo, bein b'chavero, neither to yourself and also not to anyone else. V'lo ha'chovel bilvad, and not just somebody who's actively wounds somebody, ela kol hamakeh adam kasher b'Yisrael, anybody who hits another Jew, bein katan, whether they are young, bein gadol or older, bein ish, bein isha, whether a man or a woman. Now look at this over here. Derech nitzayon. Harezeh over below ta'aseh.
What does Nitzayon mean?
Nitzayon is similar to the word bizayon. Bizayon is like in a degrading manner. Like to hit somebody is to degrade them. Like it's to mock somebody.
Dismissive, maybe.
Yes. Yeah, it's
Degrading is a bit.
Degrading, yeah, I think that's a good word. It's very undignified to be hit by other people. And if somebody else were to hit me or to wound me, what the problem over here seems to be that it's in a degree. You're just not treating another human being with respect. Harizeh over below ta'aseh shneimar lo yosif lahakoto. That's all about when you punish the. Somebody does something wrong and he's liable for malkot. You can't give him more than he is liable because that's causing a wound. V'im hizihira Torah shelo losiv lakot hachoteh kavachomer lemakay et hatzadik. If the Torah needs to tell us that when we're giving lashes to somebody who's deserving of punishment, you're not allowed to give him more than he deserves, meaning there's this terrible person who's committed a crime and we're told not to hit them. So obviously, a tzaddik, like the people in this room, obviously it would be wrong to hit them. You follow? Okay. Which is the source of this, the Isur of Chovel. Those are the words of the Rambam, but he sort of goes Do you see how he sort of expounds a little bit on the words of the Gemara? If we go to the Shulchan Aruch, you see the Shulchan Aruch goes back much more to the Gemara, the Mishnah's much shorter again. Hachovel ba'atzmo afal pi she'eino rashai patur, achirim shechavlu bo chayav. Almost a direct quote from the Mishnah in Bava Kama we see in the Shulchan Aruch. So we have the Mishnah, which is quite brief, the Rambam that sort of elaborates and even gives this rationale of derech bizayon, and then we go to the Shulchan Aruch that reverts back really to the wording of the Mishnah. Joy. Okay. From then, there's not a lot of discussion about, like plastic surgery for about 2,000 years. But I'm guessing that to be the case. Or at least I didn't come across. But I'm guessing because it really wasn't, elective surgery is a relatively recent phenomenon. I am thinking to myself. Because I don't think people would be willing to put themselves in that sort of danger sort of 100 years ago.
They probably didn't have the money.
Yeah, didn't all the resources or anything else. So the whole idea, oh wow, Shalom Aleichem, how are you doing on this cold winter night? What a pleasure to see you, Yisrael. How are you? Shalom uvracha, Yisrael. We're talking about cosmetic surgery, of elective surgery, and we looked at the Mishnah, the Rambam, and the Shulchan Aruch, who all agree that it's forbidden, but the Rambam, in his presentation of this halacha, sort of adds a rationale that we haven't seen mentioned elsewhere, that the problem seems to be not just causing the blood, someone to draw blood, but he's worried about this derech nitzayon, that is a degrading way to treat another human being. Okay. So I'm not sure I saw anything until we get to, there's two poskim that say different things, but at the same time. Rav Moshe Feinstein, now he died in the 1980s, and he lived in America, in the Lower East Side of New York. And then we have the Tzitz Eliezer, Rav Eliezer Waldenbach. He lived to a very old age, perhaps over 100, I think. And he passed away not that long ago, maybe 10, 15 years ago. And he lived here in Yerushalayim Ir HaKodesh. In fact, I think he lived near the Shuk. Okay, in Nachlaot. So we're going to read, they were both asked, I guess, probably about 50 years ago, when I'm guessing plastic surgery, cosmetic surgery, became a more...
70s.
Yeah, exactly. So they were really writing about these things very early on. I'm going to read the question to Rav Moshe Feinstein, and then perhaps we'll spend a minute considering what we would do, and then we'll read what he writes. Nish'alti, I was asked, B'na'ara, I was asked about a young lady, Sherotza liyapot atzma, Kadei sheyikpatzu aleha lekadsha. Al-yedei ma she'im etziu ata harofim al-yedei nituach, shehu chabala b'gufa, im muteret mitzad ha'isur lechvo va'atzmo. Okay, so it's quite an unfortunate story. There's a very sweet young lady who is having trouble finding her soulmate. And it seems to be, or seems to her, that the reason why she's having trouble finding a soulmate is because something about her physical, the way she looks isn't great.
The question is, can they do surgery to shrink it? And the Rav, or the person who asked this question, sent it to 3 different Ravs. And one of the Ravs sent back is, the reason why you're allowed to do it is because the likelihood of her surviving this is a whole lot more than her dying. And if this were to be 100 years ago, it would be the opposite answer.
Excellent. Ezra, very good. Rav Moshe Feinstein was asked this question, but his approach, we'll come to what he says. It's similar, but not. He was asked a question. The question is about this poor young woman who's really having trouble doesn't have very much luck, because I guess people are I don't know, maybe superficial, I don't know what the word is,
Superficial.
and it's becoming tricky for her to find a soulmate. I'll just tell you a very quick story that's not connected to this, and then we'll look at Rav Moshe Feinstein. There was, many years ago in London, there's a very, very, very sweet, holy nurse. She was a nurse, a Jewish nurse, and I think she would have also have wondered this question of Rav Moshe Feinstein. And she wasn't getting any no one was making any suggestions for, because the way she looked. Anyway, because she worked as a nurse, she used to work with people that need help. There was a guy, a very sweet Jewish boy, who was blind, and he became her patient, and eventually they got married. Anyway, let's go back to our case over here. So the Rav Moshe Feinstein was asked the question, would she be allowed to do this surgery in order, now she got this, the wording is quite interesting, in order that she become more available. Okay, now, Rav Moshe Feinstein makes a very, very interesting deduction in the Rambam. He says like this, if you have a look in the Rambam says you're not allowed to wound yourself. We see this in the Mishnah and the Shulchan Aruch as well. But notice how in the Rambam he says you're not allowed to wound yourself or have someone else wound you. Derech nitzayon. That if the way that they're performing this procedure is in a degrading manner. So according to Rav Moshe Feinstein, the problem in plastic surgery or in cosmetic surgery the problem in Kabbalah in general is that Kabbalah is a degrading thing. To wound myself, to wound somebody else, drawing blood from another person is a very undignified way to behave with somebody else. When people have a fist fight, it's just such a uncouth, such a uncultured, it's just like people behaving like animals. That's what's forbidden according to the Rambam. The Rambam is, this is how Rav Moshe Feinstein, this is a chidush of Rav Moshe Feinstein in reading the Rambam. And he suggests, Rav Moshe Feinstein suggests, therefore, based on this reading of the Rambam, that if the purpose of the surgery, on the contrary, I'm not doing it as an act of degradation, on the contrary, the reason why I want to do it is because I believe that as a result, I'm doing it out of the opposite in order to enhance myself, then, says Rav Moshe Feinstein, it would be permitted. Is that clear? Now you have to be a bit careful, because where's the line and what's right and what's wrong? It's not an easy question. But if you have a look over here, I'm going to just read you over here. Harambam in the second paragraph, Katav in the Hilchot Chovel Umazik, Haka'al Adam Kasher Yisrael Shehud B'Maka Derech Nitzayon, Ulechat Girusa Derech Bizayon. One of the Girusa says Nitzayon or Bizayon, but it means in a degrading manner. Al Kain. Therefore, says Rav Moshe Feinstein, we're in the second line of the second paragraph of Rav Moshe Feinstein. B'uvdazu sha'chabala hi leyapota harei eino derech nitzayon uvizayon shelo shaykh ha'isur. The isur of Kabbalah is not relevant in the case of cosmetic surgery. V'im b'makah ממכה חברו הוא רק דרך ניסיון וביזיון, גם במכה בעצמו אין לאסור כשהוא לייפות שאין לו דרך ניסיון וביזיון. I'm not doing it as an act of degradation, I'm doing it on the contrary, because I think I will look better as a result of that, and therefore, it rules Rav Moshe Feinstein that she would be allowed to do this. Is that clear? Mm-hmm. Those are the words of Rav Moshe Feinstein. Joy, happiness, questions? Okay.
I'm not so sure yet why Rav Moshe took at this point the route of the Rambam, which is the route of a wound, because if it's by consent and if it's to enhance, it's obviously not going to be degrade. It's not even near the level of a wound. And why we're not taking the route of something that's self-inflicted, of drawing blood. which might be more.
No, so he's saying, according to Rav Moshe Feinstein, that the issue of drawing blood is only if I'm drawing blood
To degrade.
to degrade. There is no issue of drawing blood
That's the
other
only-
than if I'm doing it as an act of degradation.
So that's our only route. There are
Right,
other
exactly.
routes in that case.
That's
Okay.
according to, I think what Rav Moshe Feinstein is basing himself on is the fact that the Rambam very rarely adds to that which was mentioned beforehand. And over here, the Rambam felt the need to include a rationale to understand the concept of Kabbalah. So according to the Rambam, according to Rav Moshe Feinstein's understanding of the Rambam at least, the only type of Kabbalah, the only type of forbidden drawing blood is if you're doing it in a degrading manner.
I was going to say that it's not necessarily just about consent, because let's say like a cage fighting match, bare knuckle brawl, people,
Right.
they
Right.
bet on it, whatever, who's going to knock the other guy out.
It's so funny, I have no idea what people are talking about today, but that's...
Okay, so it's like this, it's
Doesn't
kind of
matter.
illegal, but it's like basically, it's
Boxing,
like but it's
worse than
boxing, but
boxing.
it's not, it's like MMA,
Worse
it's
than
like, it's not like, with rules.
More
Just
vicious
like,
boxing.
I am
guys
just
just
so
get together,
happy
beat each
we're in
other
Kiryat
up.
Moshe.
and there's people bet on who's going to win, so that's consent. They're both consenting to be part of this, but
Right,
it is very
right,
degrading.
Right. That's
Right,
true.
so
That's true.
that would count as the consent doesn't make a difference.
Right.
He consented to be degraded by getting his face
Ah.
pummeled in.
We'll talk about that a little bit when we speak. Yes, that's a very, very excellent point. Excellent point. Yeah, I think that Rav Moshe Feinstein would have no hesitancy to say that's absolutely forbidden. Okay, now I'm just thinking. I mean, using this chid, what Rav Moshe Feinstein is saying is really quite a big chidush. That the only prohibition is drawing blood. In a degrading manner. However, I know, for example, let's say if there's a doctor. Can a doctor administer an injection to a parent? If my son is a doctor, can he give me an injection, or can he operate on me? In general, we say no, because you're not allowed to draw blood from a parent. But if we're saying that the issur, like this whole thing of drawing blood or wounding, is only when I'm doing it, degrading, then I would not limit that. But the truth is, we do limit that, which seems to indicate that we take Rav Moshe Feinstein, or at least Rav Moshe Feinstein's position is relevant, accepted almost in America, probably, concerning cosmetic surgery, but it doesn't extend to other examples of Kabbalah. Those are the words. Anyways, that's Rav Moshe Feinstein.
Wouldn't that be kibbutz avayim if I would treat my parents?
Exactly.
Even with surgery?
Exactly. It's a problem. It's not a kibbutz av because I'm not allowed to draw blood. Makeh aviv imo mot yumat.
Okay.
It could be that it's much
Insulin
more
is a
serious.
Much more simple. Insulin, which is also would be applied at home, maybe. Right, with a little thing on the finger.
Yeah.
Where it might be more relevant than or more applicable.
Yeah, more common.
I think a doctor can get out of it if they say, "Oh no, it's my parents. I won't do that." But
The doctor is more inclined to say, "Okay, you still have the pikuach nefesh in your pocket, so to speak."
Yeah, but that's always available.
Well, I guess it might also be with insulin.
Okay. Well, that's Rav Moshe Feinstein's. I think in America today, that is a very, very popular position concerning cosmetic surgery, and those who do engage in cosmetic surgery in America really rely very much on this reading of the Rambam as it appears in Rav Moshe Feinstein. Now, on the other side of the argument is the Tzitz Eliezer. Tzitz Eliezer is Rav Eliezer Waldenberg here in Yerushalayim, and really he doesn't have. They were both were contemporaries, and I'm guessing they were both certainly writing within 10, 15 years of each other, but I could even be less than that. But really writing at the beginning of, like you said, in the 1970s, when this became something that was spoken about. So the Tzitz Eliezer writes like this: Chabala, to wound yourself, l'shem noi veyofi she'ein ba kol hashava shel avodat haguf, any wounding of myself for the purposes of beauty that provides no medical advantage, im ki lachvol kadei l'shanato lefi ta'amo, but rather I want to change the way I look based on what I consider to be beautiful, ulehitchachem al hatzura shechakak bo yotzro, and I want to say that I know better than the way that God designed me, or kadei lechadesh na'orav, or get rid of some of the wrinkles, or listag kazerot malcho shel olam, like to change, go against nature. Al achat kamal dena'ala mikol safek ta'asu lo la'adom בהחלט להכניס את עצמו עבור כך לשום סכנה כלשהי. You would not be allowed to put yourself into any danger in order to achieve this questionable goal. Okay, ובכך כפול הוא על פי רוב הניתוח, האחד בחלק הכתוב שמשם מוציאים חתיכת האור, והשני במקום שרוצים להרכיבו. So here, Rav Eliezer Waldenberg does not mince his words at all. In fact, he says, "Ein al ma ledaber." There's no way to justify cosmetic surgery. Now, there's a very beautiful story. When I read this thing from Rav Eliezer Waldenberg, it reminds me of this story, but I wish I could tell you where it's from in the Gemara.
Tell your creator.
Yes, I think it's in Moed, but I can't remember which Masechet.
I read it recently.
There's a very interesting. There's a rabbi called. Is actually the Rav Elazar ben Rabbi Shimon, the son of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Do you know this story?
Yes.
He was giving a shiur. He was giving a lecture. No, but this is then. No, it is that story.
Oh, okay.
He was giving a lecture, and then at the end of the lecture, he was riding out of the city, and he was feeling very good about himself because he'd just given what he considered to be an excellent shiur. And on the way out of the city, he came across this man who was incredibly ugly. A guy who was mamash, you know ugly, so times 100.
Oh,
This guy.
I know.
Oh, Ezra's with us.
And
Yes, go on.
Then he says, "Wow,
You are
you
ugly."
are very ugly." The man got very offended, and then he realized what he said and tried to ask for forgiveness.
Yeah, so he said to the guy, I mean, it's really quite hurtful.
Saying no.
Well, no, it goes more. He says,
Before that.
and that's why it connected to our story over here. When this ugly person heard this, because it's that he's a gadol batorah, to speak to you in that way can hurt a little bit, right? So then this guy said to Rav Eliezer ben Rabbi Shimon, says, "Why don't you speak to the creator and of this thing here and ask him why he created me like the way he created me?" And then Rav Eliezer, hearing that, he realized, I made a terrible mistake. And they, he asked him for forgiveness, but he refused. Anyway, he continued on his way, and Rav Eliezer ben Rabbi Shimon then arrived in the next town where he was coming to give a speech. It's a terrible story. And when he came into the city, everybody greeted him because this is, the great tzaddik is coming into the city, and the ugly man is following him. And the ugly man says to the people who are so warmly welcoming Rav Elazar ben Rabbi Shimon, "How are you you call this is the rab, this is how rabbis are?" Meaning because he was just being such a, spoken to me so badly. Rav Elazar ben Rabbi Shimon felt so terrible. And then he went into the shul and he gave a drasha. Do you know what he said? Imagine what you'd have to say then. You understand? He has to say something now in front of everybody to fix that went wrong. So he said we should learn to be flexible like a reed, and not fixed in our ways like a cedar. And then he writes, and then don't think he writes, but maybe the Gemara adds at the end that the Sefer Torah, when we write a Sefer Torah, you know what we use to write the Sefer Torah? That we use that's what I'm going to use to write the Sefer Torah, because I want the Torah to be open to everyone rather than to be this rigid text. So I have to say, I mean, everyone goes wherever they want to go with these beautiful stories, but the position of Rav Eliezer Waldenberg is a very, very powerful one, because to have surgery is to say what you're not happy with the way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created you. And I'll just tell you one little thing about this normal and not normal business. You know, like when people look ugly or don't look ugly. So it's a very, very important point, because I know that none of us are really considering cosmetic surgery, and therefore it's not relevant, the halachic piece. But there is one piece I just want to add over to you now. What makes someone ugly or not ugly is society. And society is made up of lots of different types of people. So if I buy into the culture that this is what's good and that's what's bad, so then more and more people are going to want cosmetic surgery because they're going to feel they don't fit in. But if we're able as a community to broaden the definition of what's acceptable, so then there's less need for people to need to fit in. You follow what I'm saying? There's an amazing, again, I have to find it, but there's an amazing piece of Gemara the Gemara talks about somebody called a Zaglevan. A Zaglevan is a guy whose eyes are always watering. Somebody who's doesn't have control over his tear ducts. And the Gemara tells us that this person, a Zaglevan, that drooping eyes is a mum for a Cohn. You know, if a Cohn has got these dripping eyes the whole time, it's a mum, and they can't go up to do Birkat Kohanim. Right? Now, I can't remember. I can't remember which Amora taught this teaching, but I think it was Rav Chisda. Right? So Rav Chisda said that if you're a Zaglevan, your eyes are weeping, that's a mum. You're not allowed to do Birkat Kohanim. You'll never guess what. In Rav Chisda's shul, there was a Zaglevan. And do you know whether he did Birkat Kohanim or not? He was a Cohen.
He did?
He did. So how could he do it? So because in Rav Chisda's neighborhood, everybody knew him. So if everybody knows him, you don't see it anymore. You understand? It's only like we create the mum. You understand? Like the mum only exists because society created these expectations of this is what normal looks like. This is what's acceptable. And then it puts some pressure on everybody. We have to fit in with what's acceptable. So then either you can follow Rav Moshe Feinstein and say, well, you have to fit in. You know, it's true, you can speak about society, but tachlis, there's a person in pain over here. But then Rav Waldenberg is saying that, this is the way HaKadosh Baruch Hu made me. We should all understand that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the creator of everything, let HaKadosh Baruch Hu define what a human being looks like rather than our culture. You follow? And then force certain people to fit in to that culture. Is that clear? Okay. That's the end of the part about cosmetic surgery. We're going to move on to ear piercings. Yes?
Can you do cosmetic surgery if you burn yourself, by his opinion?
That's a different question. Yeah, that's a different question.
Or if you were born with a crooked leg and you want to fix it to make it straight.
No, that's for medical. Though if there's any medical value, then you're allowed to do it. Yeah, any medical. So if there's a medical value to the surgery that I need to do, so then you'd be allowed to do it. But if there's no medical value, then you wouldn't be allowed to do it. Now, I once had...
You can also read it okay, be happy with what you have and go...
No. He does say that if there's no toilet, meaning he says... he doesn't say it. He says, it's not that you just have to be happy with the way that God created me. No, he said that he says over here, "She'ein ba kol hashava shel avedat hakuf," in the first line of the Tzitz Eliezer. Hashava shel avedut hakuf, meaning if my body is lacking something, and this operation will provide me with that which I'm lacking, then of course you go ahead with the operation. The only operations that are unacceptable, according to, are purely elective, purely, I'm just doing it because I want to do it, but there's no medical reason to do it. Does that make sense to you? Yeah, that's it. But if there's, sometimes if somebody's, God forbid, burnt, and their life will be more comfortable as a result of that, it's very rarely, if Chos V'Shalom someone gets burnt, that it's purely cosmetic afterwards. It's normally there's like the way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created us, in a certain way with the proportions of this here and that there, is normally I want to maintain those proportions. It's more, I think he's talking more about if somebody was created and this is how they look, and somebody looks in the mirror and they're not happy with how they look. The Rav Eliezer Waltenberg talks about somebody getting older that wants to stay looking young. That sort of stuff he's not in so much favor of. That's what he's talking about. Okay, that's all on cosmetic surgery. I want to add a little point here. It's a beautiful little story. Really, really sweet story. It's in Hebrew, but I want to read you the story. It's a story of Rav Aaron Lichtenstein. You heard of Rav Aaron Lichtenstein? He was a Rosh Yeshiva in Yeshivat Har Etzion. Passed away very recently, in the last few years. And he was very close to Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. You heard of Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, who lived here in Yerushalayim in Shaarei Chesed. And he tells a beautiful story. It's part of the eulogy that Rav Lichtenstein, gave to Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, and he tells an amazing, sweet little story. This is the story. Once, Hayali vikuach im biti atzira. Rav Lichtenstein says, I had an argument with my little daughter. Al ritzona lechorer et chanuchei haoznaim kedei lahadkin bahem agilim. My daughter wanted to pierce her ears in order to have earrings. Ha'inyan kashilasmo lo matza chen beinai. I didn't like the idea of my daughter piercing her ears. Aval milvad zot, it wasn't just that it's not my taste, but more than that, amarti la ki nidme li sheyesh bekach she'ela shel isur chabala. I was worried. It's not just that I don't like pierced ears. I'm concerned maybe she'd be transgressing the isur chabala, because at the end of the day, it is drawing blood, right? And because of that, I managed to postpone, she wanted it, and I managed to push her off by saying that it's, it might be a problem of chabala, of wounding yourself. The yom minayamim. Then one day, ba biti v'sha'ala, my daughter asked me, Umam yomar Rosh Shlomo Zalman shezeh mutar? What happens if we ask Rosh Shlomo Zalman, and if he says that you're allowed, then we follow him? Hitkasharnu elav, we called him, kavanu bikisha, and we arranged to visit him on Motzei Shabbat. Uvanu leveito, we came to his house. Parasi lefanav et hashela v'etzagti lo et chashashai. Said, I explained the question to him and my concerns, the problem of Kabbalah. Hivchanti bevat tzchok shematchila levat tzvetz al panav. Hu he'ezin ulasof amar. He said, I saw he would started to smile. And then he says, listen, etzleinu haya minhag. When I was a child, there was a minhag. Kasher ben nolad asu lo brit milah. When a boy was born, they would do a brit milah. Ukasher nolda bat, and when a girl was born, asu lachor ba'ozen, they give her earrings. V'izbirli madua ladato ein kan kol makom l'sheila. And then he explained to me why he doesn't think there's any problem with earrings. Kfar siparti ba'avar I've told this story many times. I want to tell the story again. I was full of emotion when I left his house. Not because he rejected what I said. Meaning it was an argument between me and my daughter, and Rosh Shlomo Zalman ruled in favor of my daughter. Kibalti mimenu ba'avar kol milah she'amar. I accepted everything he said. Aval b'shela hitiyachasut v'harutzinut b'shama et hashela. He took my daughter's question seriously. Be'inyan shenira minukuta riyot mesuyamet kol katnani v'shtuti. From some people could say, wasting the time of the Gadol Hador about one little girl's earrings might seem superfluous. Aval, im liyalda bat 13. If this 13-year-old girl, it's important to her, az ze chashuv gam lo. If it's important to her, that is important for him. Maspik chashuv kadei shikablu hityaches v'yaneh. That you should listen, relate to it, and give an answer. Even if it's the smallest thing in the world. From there we see, according to Rav Aaron Lichtenstein, based on Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, that it does not seem to be a problem to have piercings. There's no danger really involved.
That's regarding earrings.
Huh?
It's regarding earrings, but piercings. It's not a matter.
Excellent. So we're going to talk about piercings now. Okay, so that's, concerning the halachic discussion of piercings, it seems that it's not, it doesn't seem to fall under the rubric of Kabbalah. Nowadays, they probably have machines that they don't even draw blood when they pierce an ear.
It's like a hot needle, and the heat closes up the wound even before it can even... any blood can come out. So
you are mamash on fire. It's unbelievable.
So yeah, it's very safe these days to get piercings. Generally, yes.
Yeah, excellent. But there is something about piercings, and that's why I brought this thing at the bottom.
Can you also by earrings argue like that well, most of the Jewish women do that, so it's the cheretz, and therefore you can argue like that?
Nothing is just saying it's just not a problem of Kabbalah. But what he doesn't talk about is not that I'm a big expert, but there's an earlobe over here, right? But sometimes people do, can go all the way up and around, and various other nose rings, lots of other places as well that people can do piercings. Are we saying that piercings are fine, or are we saying just on the earlobes? So on that issue, it's less. It's more. The sort of, in terms of deciding halacha, there are different aspects of a halachic ruling. Sometimes the halachic ruling is based purely on sources. However, there's also something about sort of doing something that would exclude me from the normative Jewish community. And here, the aspect of the halachic ruling is not based exclusively on a text, but is also on wider factors. So I want to read something from the bottom over here that I like very, very much. He writes like this: Halacha takes any wounding of the body, even if they are self-inflicted, very seriously. It sees the body as belonging to God, and we saw that very strongly in the Tzitz Eliezer, Nachon. Why would I interfere with the way that God created me? I would prohibit any masochistic behavior. There is even a debate if wounding is allowed for the sake of beauty. If the body piercing is done solely for the sake of beauty, there would be a debate about its permissibility. However, if it is done to associate with the subculture of, what's that word? Masochism and self-destruction, it would violate the prohibition against wounding. Now, I think what this is Rabbi Chaim Steinmetz is writing over here, that the clothes that I wear and the piercing, whatever, I'm choosing to identify myself in a particular subculture. So it's true that perhaps, let's say, a man who decides to get a piercing, right? So there's no, if it's okay for women, there's no, and lots of men today have piercings, so you couldn't really argue that it's a woman's item of clothing and not a man's item of clothing. There are many, many men in the world that have piercings, but the problem is more that when I have when I have a piercing, I'm choosing to identify myself as part of the community who have this particular piercing. You follow? And the Torah, the Torah community is really much more narrow than that. There is no part of the Torah community in which males have piercings. So therefore, Halacha would forbid it because it would be an expression of associating myself with a community outside of the Torah community. You follow? And likewise for women. Different times in Jewish history, society isn't static, it moves. But the piercings have to be piercings that reflect the Torah community. You follow? And therefore to have a piercing that is not, that I'm doing as part of an identification outside of the Torah community would be forbidden. But it's not forbidden because of purely Kabbalah. It's forbidden because I've chosen with this expression, I've chosen to identify myself as someone outside of the Torah community. Does that make sense to you? Okay. So I want to summarize very, very quickly. We spoke at the beginning about the concept of Kabbalah. Then we looked at Rav Moshe Feinstein's reading of the Rambam, Derech Bizayon, that what's forbidden is to inflict a wound in a degrading manner, and therefore cosmetic surgery that's not degrading would be permitted. That was Rav Moshe Feinstein. And then we saw, according to the Tzitz Eliezer, and then we added that beautiful story about Rav Elazar bar Rabbi Shimon, they're talking about, no, God created me. This is how Hashem created me. It's not our job to modernize or update or change the way that Hashem created me. If one is moving, getting on in age, so that's because Hashem created, Naraiti, V'gam Zachanti. That's really how nature works, and I shouldn't be defying that, unless if it's for medical reasons, of course. But I shouldn't be defying that as trying to, manipulate the way that Hashem created the world. And then on piercings, we just had a beautiful story of Rav Moshe Feinstein, of Rav Ari Lichtenstein, and then this second perspective. Questions, comments? Ezra, do you have any questions?
No.
Is that clear? Joy?
Yes.
Any other comments, thoughts, questions?
Could we extend
Yes.
our final idea here from Rabbi Steinmetz
Yeah.
about intending to associate with a subculture to clothing? I'd imagine, yes,
Yes.
for sure. Now, could we say, just for the sake of discussion, can a Haredi say that the Dati Leumi, by their manner of dress, is choosing to associate with another subculture? Now, of course, we will say yes, but it's still a Jewish subculture. Obviously, it's still a religious subculture, but that's per our perspective. A counter argument would say,
No,
years ago,
because that's different. I'll tell you what the difference is. The community of people with piercings it's like anti-Torah.
Wow, okay.
Do you know what I mean? Like I'm allowed to integrate into general society.
Right.
I know in the Halacha, we've spoken in the past about something like Chukot HaGoyim. Chukot HaGoyim, it's not that I'm not allowed to do anything that non-Jews do, but I'm not allowed to do things that non-Jews do as part of a religious service. That's why Thanksgiving is okay and New Year's is a problem, because Thanksgiving has got no religious undertones. That's not Chukot HaGoyim, but New Year's is Chukot HaGoyim. So I think the same applies to clothing. There's clothing that general society wear, and then there's a choosing to identify as part of an Torah environment.
For which
Do you know what I
reason Rabbi Steinmetz here said specifically, he didn't have to say here a group of masochism. It could have just said choosing to leave the Torah culture. So it's specifically towards another culture.
Yes, correct. There is no Torah community in which men have piercings. So I'm choosing. I know that I'm the guy. If God forbid, you shouldn't do it. But the guy who would have a piercing and then walk to shul the next morning, he knows he's made. I've made a statement.
Right.
You understand?
Yes.
And so any piercing that you walk and feel, I've made a statement. That's forbidden, because that's you're stepping out of the community. You're choosing to identify outside of the community, and that would be a problem. This is really beyond the Kabbalah issues. It's a wider community issue. Yishar Koach to everybody. We should be blessed to the way that our outsides impact our insides. So our outside should be shalem, in order that Be'ezrat Hashem our insides should be shalem as well. Yishar Koach.